It's March 1st, Independence Movement Day here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's begin with the headlines. The UN Security Council's 15 member states will decide if the strongest sanctions yet on Pyongyang will pass. It's good to go if more than 9 votes are cast in favor of the resolution at 5 a.m. Korea time Wednesday. Korea celebrates Independence Movement Day with a host of events. During a commemorative speech, President Park Geun-hye reminds North Korea that the door to dialogue is always open. The main opposition party appears set to end its relay filibuster, blocking a controversial anti-terrorism bill. If it does, it will clear the way for voting on that and other stalled bill, redrawing Korea's electoral map. The UN Security Council is expected to vote on a new set of sanctions on North Korea Tuesday in New York. Despite a slight delay, it seems this fresh resolution drafted by the U.S. will earn unanimous support from member states. Park Ji-won has our top story.
The 15 member states of the UN Security Council will cast their votes on the new sanctions resolution on North Korea at 3 p.m. in New York on Tuesday. This comes in response to Pyongyang's recent nuclear and missile tests. If more than 9 Security Council members vote in favor of the resolution with no opposition from any of Council's 5 permanent members like China and Russia, it will be adopted. A draft on the sanctions resolution was agreed upon by the U.S. and China and submitted late last month. Russia requested extra time to review the draft, but has reportedly given it the go-ahead. This will mean Pyongyang will be slapped with a total arms embargo. A ban on sales of aviation and rocket fuel to North Korea will be put in place, as well as mandatory inspections of all cargo going into and out of North Korea. The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, said the adoption of the resolution would send an unambiguous and unyielding message to the North Korean regime that the world will not accept its proliferation and there will be consequences for its actions. She also reiterated that the measures would be the strongest set of sanctions imposed by the Security Council in more than 2 decades. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
While the UNSC gears up to convene on North Korea, the possibility of more nuclear tests by Pyongyang suggests that a timely response to the communist state's provocations is of the essence. Lee Ji-won sheds light on new threats surfacing from up north.
Less than 2 months after North Korea conducted its 4th nuclear test, new data suggests the communist state may be preparing for another one. According to a report published by the state-run Korea Institute for Defense Analysis, movement at the North's Punggye-ri nuclear test site showed at least 3 more nuclear tests may be possible. The latest analysis by the think tank carries weight. It also foreshadowed North Korea's claimed H-bomb test 3 days before it was conducted in early January. According to data it gathered, tests on 2 fission bombs and a hydrogen bomb seem to be possible. This is because an underground mine in the southern area of the test site, as well as a freshly dug second mine, seem to be undergoing preparations for potential future testing. The think tank points out that the mines look to go deep underground and have only 1 tunnel, which implies efforts to reduce the spread of radiation from a massive type of explosion. And if the North does carry out a 5th nuclear test, KIDA says its next move will not be a test but an actual nuclear bomb. The report urged that talks or sanctions on North Korea must be worked out fully to also include the removal of a graphite moderated reactor in Yongbyon, which is the North's key means of producing tritium and plutonium. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Today marks Korea's 97th Independence Movement Day. In her speech at a commemorative ceremony, President Park Geun-hye invited North Korea back for talks despite the hostile inter-Korean climate, but under one condition, that Pyongyang abandons its nuclear ambition. Song Ji-san shares with us the president's message.
President Park Geun-hye revived her vision for unification in her Independence Movement Day address on Tuesday, saying unifying the 2 Koreas is the way to continue the legacy of those who fought for independence 97 years ago.
우리가 통일을 염원하는 이유는 핵무기 없는 세상의 비전이 한반도에서 시작되고 우리가 누리고 있는 자유와 인권 번영을 북한 동포들도 함께 나눌 수 있도록 하기 위해서입니다. 정부는 평화와 번영, 자유의 물결이 넘치는 새로운 한반도를 만들어 갈 것이며 그것이 바로 3.1운동 정신의 승화라고 굳게 믿고 있습니다.
After taking a stern stance on North Korea following its fourth nuclear test and long-range missile launch, President Park left the door open for dialogue, saying it's up to Pyongyang now, but that its pursuit of nuclear weapons will only bring about an end to the regime.
앞으로 우리 정부는 대화의 문을 닫지는 않을 것이지만 북한이 비핵화 의지를 보이지 않고 변화를 거부하는 한 우리와 국제사회의 압박은 계속될 것입니다. 정부는 앞으로 더욱 확고한 안보 태세와 국제 공조를 바탕으로 북한이 반드시 핵을 포기할 수밖에 없도록 만들어 갈 것입니다. 이제 선택은 북한의 몫입니다.
Referring to Seoul and Tokyo's settlement of the wartime sexual slavery issue, reached at the end of last year, President Park said Tokyo must sincerely fulfill its pledges to open a new chapter of bilateral relations, and that Japan must acknowledge history and its past wrongdoing. Pointing to her initiative for improving Korea's economic fundamentals, President Park says she will move forward with her major reform drives and emphasize that labor reform is the most important way to create more jobs for Korea's young people. 송기선, 아리랑 뉴스.
97 years ago today, public demonstrations were held around the country as Korea demanded its independence from Japan's colonial rule. Kim Ji-yeon takes us to the various events held to honor the spirit of the revolutionaries.
The city of Seoul held a series of events on Tuesday to honor the 3.1운동, or March 1st movement. On one side of the city, families gathered at Seodaemun Prison History Hall to watch the performances held there. Members of a children's choir wore matching black skirts and white chogori, a traditional Korean garment, and sang a song commemorating the day. Pedestrians waved the Korean national flag and cheered in a reenactment of the demonstrations held 97 years ago as the Republic of Korea demanded its independence from Japanese colonial rule. Participants headed to booths where they could write a letter commemorating the 33 patriotic martyrs who gave their lives for the country. Across town, Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon and 12 descendants of independence patriots took turns ringing the Posinggak bell at a ceremony to honor the fallen. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
To mark the March 1st movement, we take a look at where Seoul-Tokyo relations are today. Kwon So-hwa looks into whether the pain from Japan's colonial rule and wartime atrocities remain or if things are moving in a more positive direction.
They enjoy each other's culture, like to travel to each other's countries, and are major trade partners. On the other side, historic and territorial disputes have been straining their relations for decades. The Korea-Japan relationship is still struggling today, decades after Japan's colonial rule over South Korea and beyond Korea's liberation from the neighboring country. That includes Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women before and during World War II, as well as its attitude toward those crimes. On that front, hope for a breakthrough sprouted on December 28th last year.
It's been 2 months now since South Korea and Japan's landmark agreement on the so-called comfort women issue. But then why are demonstrations here in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul on that matter still being held every Wednesday?
For one, many Korean citizens and victims, of which only 44 are alive today, do not accept the deal, saying it lacks sincerity.
There needs to be an apology based on precise historical consciousness from Japan, not one of mere diplomatic expression. I feel there is a lot of ambiguity.
However, the government said numerous times a renegotiation is not possible, but that it'll do its best with the remaining tasks, such as ensuring the transfer of the promised compensation of roughly $8.9 million from Japan through a South Korean foundation.
The establishment of the foundation is an important part to the implementation of the deal. Working level talks with the Ministry of Gender, Equality and Family are in process.
But experts say that despite the achievements between the two governments, there is more work to be done.
We all know that we have attempted many things to normalize our relationship with Japan, but it has been pretty much limited on the government level. But the people-to-people level is not really good yet.
Along with the step-by-step improvements in the political and diplomatic arena, we should expand our bilateral project to boost economic cooperation. And during that process, anti-Korea and anti-Japan sentiment could be reduced.
That may take some time, though, as Japan's sincerity about improving relations with Korea is being questioned. Even after the December 28th deal, Japan submitted a denial to the UN, saying there was no evidence that its military forcibly detained women, and continues to lay claim to Korea's easternmost Dokdo Island. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
Turning to local politics now, Korea's main opposition party says it's ending its more than a week-long filibuster aimed at blocking the passage of a controversial counterterrorism bill. But it delayed its announcement on the matter earlier this morning to hold a general meeting of its lawmakers, which is scheduled to start within the hour. Shin Se-min brings us the latest.
The main opposition Minju Party of Korea said it would end its relay filibuster of a contested counterterrorism bill sometime on Tuesday. But just minutes before the press conference that had called to make the announcement scheduled to start at 9 a.m., floor leader Lee Jong-gol postponed it, saying the party was going to hold an emergency general meeting of its lawmakers first. The filibuster has blocked voting on both the counterterrorism bill and a new electoral map that redraws districts ahead of a general election on April 13th. The Minju Party has been calling for a vote on the electoral map after striking an agreement with the ruling party on the constituency map. But if it ends its filibuster, the counterterrorism bill will automatically come up for a vote. And in that case, the bill would most likely pass as the ruling Saenuri Party holds 157 seats in the 293-member parliament. Meanwhile, Saenuri Party floor leader Won Yu-chul said Tuesday the party, which wants to schedule a vote on both bills for Wednesday morning, would not allow any more revisions to the counterterrorism bill. The Minju Party objects to the part of the bill that says it would give the National Intelligence Service more power to conduct surveillance on the public. The ruling Saenuri Party says the bill should pass as is to better protect the country amid the growing threats from North Korea and international terrorism. Whether the Minju Party will go ahead with the filibuster or end it and allow a vote remains to be seen. Its general meeting is scheduled for 6:30 p.m. Tuesday. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Korea's exports have had their longest downward slide ever, and with the continuation of the global economic slowdown, experts aren't so optimistic there will be a turnaround anytime soon. Kim Min-ji looks into the discouraging digits.
It's another slump. According to the Trade Ministry, Korea's exports fell over 12% in January from the same month last year to $36.4 billion. That marks the 14th straight month of decline and the longest downward streak ever, replacing the previous record of 13 months from March 2001. The ministry attributed the fall to low global oil prices and slow global economic growth, especially in China. Exports of petroleum products and petrochemicals drove the decline, while falling export prices also pulled the figure down. But thanks to an uptick in shipments of mobile devices and computers, the February figure marks an improvement from the previous month, when exports fell over 18%, the biggest yearly drop in more than 6 years.
Among the outbound shipments that increased, exports of computers went up due to growing demand for PC exchanges, while wireless devices also rose thanks to the launch of new products.
Imports, on the other hand, slid nearly 15% on year to $29 billion in February, due mainly to a slump in shipments of raw materials and capital goods. As a result, last month's trade surplus amounted to $7.4 billion, extending the surplus streak for the 49th straight month. However, what's worrisome is that the surpluses have mainly been driven by a sharp decrease in imports, rather than an increase in exports.
The global economy is facing difficulty, and as these conditions linger, it's hard to say Korea's exports will make a major improvement.
The government has vowed to do all it can to boost the country's outbound shipments, but experts predict the downward trend will continue throughout the first half of the year. Kim Min-si, Arirang News.
More disappointing numbers. Korea's per capita GDP last year is estimated to have decreased for the first time since global financial crisis. According to figures released by the Seoul-based Hyundai Research Institute on Tuesday, Korea's per capita GDP in 2015 stood at slightly over $27,200, a 2.6% drop from the previous year. It's the first decline since the year 2009, when Korea recorded a more than 10% on-year decrease. While countries like the U.S., China, and India posted an increase, Japan saw an on-year decrease, dropping over 10%. Citing figures from the IMF, the institute said over 70% of 186 countries posted an on-year decrease in their per capita GDP due to sluggish global economy and strong U.S. dollars. Turning to the U.S. presidential election, the race for the White House heats up this week. On Tuesday, Americans across more than a dozen states and territories will head to the polls on the biggest single day of voting during the election process so far. Early frontrunners Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump could end up taking resounding leads in the respective races. For details, let's turn to Kim Mo-kyun.
On March 1st, voters in 12 states and 1 U.S. territory head to the polls for the Super Tuesday contests. Super Tuesday is when the largest number of primaries and caucuses take place on a single day. Ahead of the big event, Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton visited Massachusetts and Virginia to campaign. She sent her husband Bill Clinton to make the closing pitch to Texans and her daughter Chelsea to Minnesota on her behalf. After crushing her main Democratic rival Bernie Sanders in the South Carolina Democratic primary, she is now in a strong position to win the Democratic nomination. Sanders is focusing on white liberals and millennials in Vermont and Minnesota, hoping for a reverse on Tuesday. On the Republican side, frontrunner Donald Trump continued his verbal attacks on his rivals Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio as he campaigned around Virginia and Georgia. Cruz will stay in his home state of Texas, and Rubio is putting extra focus on Minnesota. Despite the best efforts of Cruz, Rubio, and Sanders, most pundits expect Clinton and Trump to go head-to-head for the White House in the fall. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. As always, thank you for watching.